Chapter 9. The Pride Lance. The next morning, Silas was in a rotten mood. He was exhausted and miserable from poor sleep and missing his friends, despite texting with them early that morning. He thought it would help, but it only made him miss Jose and Tamara more. But Dad and Mom and even George were as chipper as the bright sun in the blue sky. "Good morning," Dad said in a cheerful tone as Silas emerged from his room, rubbing his eyes. "Is it really good?" Silas said. "Or are you just saying that because you're supposed to?" Mom exchanged a look with Dad, who smirked and threw his hands up in surrender. "Wow, you're definitely acting like a teenager now," Mom said, bouncing George on her knee. "They say it happens overnight, but I didn't believe it." That made Silas feel even more, moody and teenagery. "Come on, breakfast time," Dad said. "I'm starved. Last one to the mess hall is a rotten egg." Silas rolled his eyes. Sometimes Dad said the weirdest, corniest stuff that made no sense. Dad held open the door while Mom gathered George and all his paraphernalia. Why babies needed so much stuff just to exist was beyond Silas, and they tramped out of the cabin. In the bright, unfiltered sunlight that shone down on the camp relentlessly and was turning the day hotter by the minute, they walked toward the mess hall for breakfast. Their shoes sank into the sand as tiny pebbles crept into their socks. Despite Silas's bad mood, it was nice being able to see more of the campgrounds, also known as the Pride Lands. The grounds themselves were studded with mesas, bluffs, and red rock formations. The vegetation was the total opposite of Florida's, which was lush and tropical. Everything here looked tough and prickly, probably because it had to be in order to survive the desert heat with little water. He was especially fascinated by the devil's claws. He picked one up. It was a type of seed pod with two curved horns, kind of like a devil's talons. He'd looked it up in one of his books. They were scattered all over the sand like little warnings. Meanwhile, hiking trails wound through the rocks, connecting all the buildings from their cabin to the thatched hutch for the campers, to the mess hall, groundskeeper's shed, and infirmary, which made up the main area. This was the high desert, meaning that the temperature would climb during the day only to drop precipitously at night. The air lacked humidity, so it couldn't hold on to the sun's warmth like back in Orlando. It was also thinner, so Silas found himself huffing and puffing just from walking to breakfast. They all were, but Dad promised he would grow used to the altitude. "Your Aunt Scarlet sure was something else," Dad said nostalgically when he saw the colorful wooden signs posted all over camp with creative names for locations like Ostrich Nest Lookout and Lion's Den Mess Hall, which was where they were headed for breakfast. "She came up with all this?" Silas asked in awe, feeling his bad mood melting under the sun. Dad nodded. "Growing up, she always had an active imagination and made up stories and dreamed of going on adventures. She kind of reminds me of you, actually, in all your books." Dad looked over at Silas, who clutched his Predator's book like a comfort blanket. "I wish I'd gotten to meet her," he said. His stomach growled, and he had to admit he was looking forward to Sarah's cooking after feasting on her tamales the previous night. "Well, exploring her camp is the next best thing," Dad said, forcing a smile, though tears were in his eyes. "She poured her heart and soul into this place. I'm sorry we didn't travel out here before she died, but finances were tight and you were so young. We always planned to when you got older, but, goes to show you can't take anything for granted." Silas nodded. "We're here now, right?" "Yes, and that's what counts," Dad said. "I'm sure your aunt's spirit knows that we're going to take good care of the place that meant the most to her." "Is that why she never got married or had kids?" Silas asked. "Because of the camp?" "Well, you could say the camp was like her partner, and the campers were her kids. In that sense, she had a ton of kids. Not everyone has to live the same way, you know. Guess you're right, Silas said with a surprised look. Never thought of it that way. Somehow, knowing that you could make your own path in life made him feel better and freer. Maybe he'd grow up to be like his parents, or maybe he'd be more like Aunt Scarlet and travel the world, having adventures and then bringing them back home to share with other kids. They reached the Lion's Den Mess Hall, a large wood-paneled building with colorful animal pictures painted all over it that could have come out of one of his books. The screen doors clapped shut behind them with a loud thwack, announcing their arrival, while the cooking aromas hit Silas's nose right away. He also heard the happy chattering of many jovial voices. "Make yourselves at home," Sarah called out from the kitchen as the others waved at them from the long wooden tables with benches. It was kind of like a picnic indoors. Silas spotted the twins, but also Raffy and Archie. Meanwhile, Sarah bustled in and out of the kitchen swinging doors, carrying large silver platters of breakfast food items and sliding them onto the center of the table. Everything here was served family style. From the looks of it, she'd prepared a meat feast for their arrival. Bacon, scrambled eggs with cheese, pancakes with maple syrup, and real butter. Even some chocolate chip ones for the kids. Silas climbed into a seat next to them, while Sarah loaded up his plate with chocolate chip pancakes. Then she slipped him some homemade whipped cream with a conspiratorial wink. "Don't tell your folks." Silas beamed at her and felt his mouth watering. It felt like home. Well, the home he always wanted, where he didn't eat cold cereal by himself every morning. Right away, he adored Sarah and her motherly energy, something he'd been missing from his own mother since George. "See all those pictures?" Natasha said through a mouthful of pancake. She pointed to the wall that was filled with framed photographs. "Those are all the old campers." "Oh, wow. So many of them," Silas said. "And look at all the animals, too." Some of the old black and white pictures looked like they dated back to the inception of the camp. His aunt appeared in each photo, aging as they went along. In each image, she wore a safari outfit, a khaki button-up shirt, matching shorts, socks hiked up to her knees, and hiking boots. A wide-brimmed hat crowned her head while she clutched her walking stick. In many of the photos, Zazu was perched on the top of the staff, completing her signature look. "Oh, where's Zazu?" he asked the twins. He scanned the mess hall, hoping to spot the parrot. "We left him in his cage at home. He kept repeating, 'Danger, danger, beware the Ark,'" Timothy said. "He's acting kind of weird, strange." "Well, stranger than normal," Natasha added with a giggle, "which is saying a lot." Timothy nodded. "Yeah, he's probably not used to newcomers anymore. We've been close to campers for the last 2 summers. "How come?" Silas asked with a frown. "I don't know," Timothy said, chewing his breakfast with his mouth open. Scarlet wasn't feeling very well. She started acting kind of weird. I guess the upkeep got to be too much. "Yeah, she was planning to reopen this summer," Natasha chimed in, "but then the accident happened." "What accident?" Silas said, perking up. But Sarah shot them a look from across the table, and the twins hushed up. That was weird. Then something else popped into his head. He remembered Billy, the gas station worker, giving them a warning. Bad thing happened to folks who live up there. That made Silas feel even more freaked out. Was the accident what she meant by that? Her heart hammered, but then he glanced down at his plate. How could he be scared when he had chocolate chip pancakes? He forked up the rest and then heaped seconds on his plate, as his trouble seemed to melt away like the chocolate on his tongue. Archie turned to Silas, watching him eat with an approving look. "Hey, kid, how you liking it up here?" When Silas didn't respond right away, he added, "What's wrong? Coyotes got your tongue?" Everyone laughed, especially the twins. Timothy even spat out some pancake. Silas worried that they were teasing him, but then he relaxed. They were all smiling warmly. I've never heard it said like that, he replied. Coyotes is how we say it. You'll get used to it, Archie said with a wink. I know it's a lot of new stuff. Must be hard, all this change. But you're hanging in there, I reckon. Silas felt like he could trust Archie. He lowered his voice. Yeah. It's been tough, he confessed. I guess I miss my old home and friends, and everything is a bit strange here. Archie nodded. That's pretty normal. When I first got the job at the camp, I was a young cub like you. Well, older than you are now, he said with a shake of his head, but still pretty young. All things considered, everything out here in the Pride Lands made me jump and shake like a leaf. Silas found himself relating to all this. It did? You were afraid of stuff? Yep, all the time, Archie confided in a low voice. He clutched his staff tighter. But then I heard about the elephant graveyard. Silas sat up straighter and paid attention. He had been wondering about that. Graveyards were at the top of his phobia list. What's that? The twins giggled and rolled their eyes. Oh, here he goes again with his camp stories. But Silas was hooked. He never heard of anything like an elephant graveyard in his wildlife books. Can I trust you? Archie asked, leaning forward and clutching his strange staff. Yes, of course, Silas said right away, feeling his heart thump a little faster in anticipation. He got the feeling that whatever the groundskeeper was about to tell him, it was really important. Archie glanced around, then lowered his voice. Well, the camp legend goes that only the bravest campers can make it across the rope bridge and reach the elephant graveyard. What's in the elephant graveyard? Silas asked, both intrigued and a little intimidated. Archie thumped him playfully with his staff. The twins giggled at Archie's familiar antics. Ouch! Silas said, rubbing his head, though it didn't hurt really. What did you do that for? Now, I can't tell you that, Archie said with a silly grin. That would ruin it. Only the bravest campers can discover the truth for themselves. Only the bravest? Silas repeated, liking how that sounded. How do you know if you're brave enough? Nobody knows until they prove it by crossing the bridge, Archie said, then backtracked. But I shouldn't have said anything. It's far too dangerous for a young cub like you. Plus, you're a newbie. Maybe when you get older, kiddo. No, wait. I'm brave enough, Silas said. I swear it. Just tell me a little more about it. But Archie thumped him again playfully. Oh, I've already said too much. I suppose you'd have found out sooner or later, you being so clever and all. Just promise me you'll never visit that dreadful place. I'd hate for anything bad to happen to you. I promise, Silas said, though he didn't really mean it. Now he was fixated on the idea. He wanted to ask more questions, but Dad called Archie away from the breakfast table. They needed to get to work on repairing the camp. Before he left the mess hall, Archie leaned over and whispered in Silas's ear, Remember, it's our little secret. As he watched them depart to get to work, Silas couldn't stop thinking about the elephant graveyard. For the first time since he'd arrived here, he felt hopeful. This sounded like a real adventure, like the ones in his favorite books. But there was more. Maybe this was a way for him to prove that he was brave after all, not a scared little kid. With that cheerful thought, he polished off his pancakes and vowed to investigate it later. Despite Archie's warning, he knew he didn't have a choice. He could cross the rope bridge. He could find the graveyard. He could overcome his phobias. Then he could prove once and for all that he wasn't a coward. This was a chance for a fresh start. The elephant graveyard? Here I come.